Okay. We won't.
When the politicians keep politicking, before you turn to excessive drinking, spend some time collectively politinkering with the show where I don't know, man. 'Cause the truth is I don't know, man. I don't know, man. I don't know, man.
Hello, all you crazy kids out there in pod person land. This is your host, Sean Nasty, and welcome back to... oh, my God, this is the wrong show.
Almost.
Wow. This is your host, Sean Fau, and welcome back to Politinkering. Joining me, as always, is in studio, we have Mr. Sean O'Brien.
Hey, guys.
Oh, wrong.
Both of them.
Sorry. And then we also have Mr. Joseph O'Brien. Jesus, I am just messing up everywhere today. Mr. Joseph Bonier.
Hello.
Oh, I can do something. That was pathetic clapping.
I got tense there for a second, man.
Yeah.
That was worrisome.
I'm all off my game, man. Everyone's against me today. So, how are you, gentlemen?
Good.
Yeah.
You feeling paranoid?
I
or
was
something?
just going to go grab a pen
Mm.
as soon as you asked that. And then, no, I know there's one here, but then I saw you had it. I didn't want to fuck up your shit.
No, it's...
And so, no, now we're just a second one there?
There's pens.
We'll
There's
just
pens
fight.
everywhere.
Pen.
God.
Now I
Just
want
take
that
the
pen
pens.
instead.
All right. Pen
We're good,
15
man.
club.
I'm
All right.
good. I'm good. How you doing, Joey?
I'm good.
Sean?
Feeling
Right
proud.
on.
You haven't said how you said you're,
I'm always
You are always
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, as long as the satellites aren't reading my brain, we're okay. But can never really be too
fair
sure of
enough.
that.
Are you really worried about that?
You know.
You read tinfoil hat action?
Well, tinfoil isn't quite thick enough these days. You
Got
really
it.
need to
Okay,
like,
what's the motive?
well, first off, it's not
Defense.
tinfoil. If it was actually tinfoil, it'd be fine, but it's aluminum.
Aluminium.
You're right.
Yeah.
Aluminium foil.
But anyways, today on the show, the topic du
God,
jour.
here we go. All right, what?
Oh, why do you believe? What do we believe? How do we know what's true? What is a conspiracy? What is the difference between conspiracy and propaganda and marketing and spin? What is the connotation of the word conspiracy itself? What are some conspiracy theories that we may or may not be believing in or a party to? Are you a part of the conspiracy? Are you a member of this faction that is overlording our lives? Are you a part of the Illuminati? Are you a
Yes.
Freemason? What is your social structure, and how does that affect the rest of the world?
So, like any great conspiracy, I think this is a conspiracy theory question. Was that? I don't
Essentially.
see. Like any great conspiracy theory, it just evolved from this little stem of something into this crazy, unfolded, flowery question. So, what is the question exactly? Conspiracy theory? Am
essentially-
I part of the conspiracy? Is that your question?
What is a conspiracy, and
What is a conspiracy?
What
Okay.
what do we consider to be the connotation of the word itself, and how do we address that when it comes to quote unquote conspiracy theories?
So a conspiracy is really
Mhm.
just kind of two people conspiring against something, right? That's the basic kind of definition of it. But the broader the broader thing that we all consider is a
Mhm.
conspiracy theory, which has
Certainly.
of course a negative connotation, which is the sort of attempt to explain the attempt to explain something that is on surface unexplainable by some typically malevolent force underneath for some rationale, usually bad.
Mhm.
That's the connotation of a conspiracy theory. So
Certainly the common colloquialism of
Right.
conspiracy theory, that is
Usually,
usually what
yeah.
it falls under.
exactly, are you part of the man? Whatever. Joey, go ahead.
What do you mean? Go ahead. What?
I don't know. Sorry. I just want to throw it your way. I'm not really sure what I was doing. Don't get paranoid.
Sorry. I think
See
there's
what
a
I did there?
conspiracy.
Give me a rim shot.
Oh,
Get it?
right on. So on
Not
its face, when we talk about the term conspiracy theory, what jumps out to you? What is the topic that comes most to mind when you hear the term conspiracy theory?
To me, the number one, and maybe this is just because of history or whatever, JFK.
Me too. That
Seems
was
to
the first
be,
thing
is
for
that
me
the
too.
first thing that pops into your brain?
Yeah.
Oliver Stone.
Yeah, I think it's because it's the most reported on conspiracy theory, the most written about conspiracy theory, and the one that most people buy into, I think, interestingly. I think it's something crazy where it's like 46% of the American people still believe that the American government covered up some sort of plot.
I think it's more than 46%.
It might be more. I just kind of pulled that out of my
Is
ass.
it more than that?
I think it is more than
So
half.
is it still even a conspiracy theory if a majority
yes.
of people
Well,
believe it?
Sure.
Right,
Well,
because it's not the
conspiracy-
people that
yeah.
are believing in it that are conspiring. It's
Right,
the
it's
people
the
that
people who
conspire to
perpetrate
make it
it.
happen.
who
To me,
conspire.
there's always got that connotation that it's got to be a minority or some sort of. Go ahead. Sean.
No, I was going to say exactly. That is sort of the public shaming of the idea of a conspiracy theory in and of itself.
Yeah.
That is kind of one of those things. Like once you're labeled as that, then your words no longer have potency. It's like being called a racist these days. There's really nothing you can do to defend against it. So you're only, it's just an arbitrary blanket insult that is kind of thrown at people that have opposing
hominem.
views. Yeah, ad hominem attacks. Again, the only time I hear that word together.
Well, so go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to give you like the sort of I guess more of a weird history conspiracy theory of my own, which I guess that might be interesting to go. I don't know, whatever. I don't even know.
You shot JFK?
Well, it's funny. Like when I was younger, it's not that I was taken in by conspiracy theories. It's just that I almost sort of those were things that I kind of just assumed or believed rather. So the JFK thing, right, was the first thing that popped into my mind where I was just like, oh, it's just like, that's right. He obviously wasn't just shot by a lone gunman. That's, there was a second gunman on the grassy knoll. It was almost just common nomenclature, like, Santa Claus or God and anything that basically when I was younger, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's just a thing. I just believe that. That's fine. No big deal. I never really questioned it. Because it was kind of a story. Anything that was wrapped in a story, I'm like, I'm good, I'm down, whatever. And I didn't really care or really give any credence or really consideration to whether it was true or not. And I guess when I was in high school, there was like a moon landing special, like a special on the moon landing. That we didn't, the common conspiracy theory, we didn't actually land on the moon. It was all a movie, whatever.
Kubrick.
Right, exactly. Which wouldn't have made any sense, by the way. Kubrick would have never made that movie. It would have been so much better. But I remember watching and being like, holy shit, we didn't land on the fucking moon? That's some crazy shit, man. That's fucked up. And I was taken in by it. I was amazed. And I remember I was taking a physics class and I asked my teacher about some of the things. I was like, this is kind of crazy, man. Did you see the thing last night? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, and I started asking him some of the things that were brought up. The waving of the flag, the different, I don't remember. I think the Sea Rock was one of them. I haven't thought about this. And Sean's like, yep, confirmed.
Footprints, is that one?
It was a rock that was literally
footprints,
labeled as rock C.
Yeah,
and it was like in a different place in one photo.
Right, and
not
people
there.
was like, and people were like, see, that's a prop rock. Prop masters put letters on rocks, and I was like, and at the time I hadn't made films, so I just assumed that was true. But of course, now we know that like that's not at all what prop masters do. If you ever ask any art director, do you put a fucking letter on your props?
The most
like,
organized
why would I
prop
do
master
that?
ever.
Right?
Exactly.
Why would I do that? I can just put it in. I know what it is. It's right in front of me. This is all I have to do.
The big rock goes there.
Right. They can't put the camera anywhere if I put a fucking C on the prop. What's wrong with you? So anyway, but I remember being taken in, but I asked the physics teacher. It was just lucky. And I was like, and he gave me answers to everything. And I was just like, oh, well, right on. Cool. I guess. So I didn't continue to believe that conspiracy theory. And then I guess it probably would have been, I guess 9/11 would have been the next big one. But, by then I had already sort of seen the patterns in some of the conspiracy. It might have been Shakespeare. I want to say Shakespeare Didn't Exist was one of the ones earlier on as well.
Boo this man.
That was one of the ones where I was like, holy shit, Shakespeare didn't exist. Are you kidding me? He did all this shit. I guess it makes sense. It was so long ago, blah, blah, blah. And I did all that. And of course, by the time I was in college, like I asked professors and I asked scholars about this stuff, and they're like, it's kind of a common conspiracy theory. No, and here are the facts, but this, and here's why it is. And sure, it's not an invalid claim. It's possible, I guess, but no, it is unfalsifiable. Which, of course, I'll talk about unfalsifiable. But anyway, we'll talk about those.
That's a huge topic.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I guess by the time the 9/11 conspiracy theory came around, I had already sort of seen a lot of the patterns. And that was the one that was particularly kind of heinous to me, where I was just like, that's what this is, your belief system. That's kind of what it is. And I started to see the fact that you're taking all these kind of disparate facts, and piecing them together for the purposes of a narrative, because that kind of makes sense. It's sort of horrific to think that the conspiracy itself was just a bunch of kind of crazy, Islamic fundamentalists causing horror and to bring down the American economy and all that. There was a conspiracy. It's just it wasn't the type of conspiracy theory that's sort of sexy,
yeah,
right?
That's true.
And so that was kind of particular, especially being from New Jersey. It's just like, I was like, really, that's what you fucking believe? This okay, that's it. And I gave it half a thought. It might have been the South Park episode that first shed light onto that. And then there was the commentary of the South Park episode that brought into it, and there was an interview between the Popular Mechanic, the editors of the Popular Mechanics, and the guys who made, I think it was Loose Change was the movie. There was a radio interview between them, and I listened to that. This is back when it wasn't YouTube or whatever. You had to really search, and it was just that little fucking bar. You click on some
a real
MP3
player or something.
Exactly, right. And I listened to it, and you start to hear the paranoia of the conspiracy theories. Well, how do you explain this? What do you mean? How do you explain it?
Hyperbolic,
right? And the popular scientists are essentially like, well, there's a perfectly rational explanation for this. Well, this is what jet engine fuel does, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sort of rambling, fittingly enough. I guess the point is that they took me in because of the narrative when I was younger, but at a certain point, I started to question whether or not, and really, really, really care whether or not everything I believe is actually true. That's the most important thing.
It should be like on your crest, like your fat. Like
I want to believe as many true things as possible and as few things as possible.
I need the truth.
Give me some believe truth. As many few things and not, or whatever. You know what I mean? Believe as many true things as possible and not believe anything is false. As few false things.
I like that you said pattern. You have a different. I mean, I'm kind of curious, actually. What other patterns did you notice? You said there was like piecing together of certain disparate facts, but what other patterns do you notice in conspiracy theory?
The main kind of pattern I've seen in general is what's known as the argument from ignorance fallacy. It's a logical fallacy which kind of goes like this: X is true because X has not been proven false. Okay, so you make the claim. There was a conspiracy behind the government. Everyone was able to do this. How do you explain this? How do you explain, how do you explain the sea rock? How do you explain the inertia? How do you explain this? And they take all those disparate facts, right? And if there's one point that you can't necessarily claim it, right? Well, then my view must be true because you can't explain. You can't explain to the contrary. You can't disprove me. Therefore, I am correct. And that's what's known as the argument from ignorance fallacy. And the example I gave actually is a bad example. So don't take that to heart. But basically that's the point. X is true because X has not been proven to be false. If you can't prove a person who truly believes the conspiracy, if you can't disprove the conspiracy, then it must be true. And that's a fallacy. It's a logical fallacy, right? The biggest thing also, by the way, I mean, I'm going to fucking talk way too much.
No, you're not.
Sorry. Okay. The big, it's funny. This kind of goes into something that happened a couple episodes ago with you, Sean, and a friend of mine a long time ago. So I think it was either Facebook. I posted something very similar to the kind of Hillary Clinton, Trump episode, like we talked about in the last episode, or not Hillary. I'm sorry. The abortion point, right? The Facebook post. I basically would post something like that. And
provocateur.
I guess it was like something provocative. And somebody posted on it, it constantly blows my mind that the most optimistic person I know is also the most cynical. And I was like, okay. And Sean, another different, I don't remember exactly what episode it was, but at some point we were talking about skepticism and whether or not I was a skeptic toward it might have been the news episode. Like I'm a consummate skeptic.
Yeah.
And you were saying, no, the glass is too half full for me to be a skeptic. It sort of got cut off in there. But so it's funny, at both points, those two terms are being conflated and confused. Cynicism and skepticism are two specifically different things, right? A true skeptic demands facts. They demand the facts behind everything that they can believe in, and they will not believe anything until they are sufficiently convinced, right? A cynic, on the other hand, believes things out of disbelief in a weird way, and also believes things because of a sort of a pessimism for the world, essentially,
preconceived notion.
A preconceived notion, right? So that sort of is a cynic. A cynic will believe things. A skeptic will only believe things based on evidence. A cynic
Okay.
will not, or at least there's a question between good evidence and bad evidence.
Mhm.
So I am absolutely a skeptic. I'm 100% a skeptic. I'm not a cynic at all.
But you would say conspiracy theorists are cynics.
I would say that they claim themselves to be skeptics, and they think that they're skeptics, but I think they're actually cynical because they hold a belief that I would say is arguably irrational in many cases. So yeah, it's I think that they're closer to cynics than skeptics, at least.
So do you inherently believe everything that is passed down from the government? Every account that they give of things? Is there no sort of room for wiggling and shenaniganery?
Well, see, the problem that we run into there is the idea that people, as far as I can tell, have a very serious problem keeping secrets. And I think the idea of a conspiracy requiring many different people across all different, life spectrums and backgrounds, from the guy cleaning up the floor to the president of the United States, keeping said secret, I think is unlikely. Now that isn't to say, and also keep in mind the possibility of that being uncovered is monstrously detrimental. I can give you guys a great example of a conspiracy that actually exists. And you guys will both know instantly who broke it. Watergate. That was a conspiracy, right? And the journalists who broke that story because of those facts, right? And they more or less kept it up, but not really. There was Deep Throat, right? Deep Throat actually kind of did. He gave this, he gave them sources, and it turned out to be true. So Woodward and Bernstein, right? And yet, who came up with the moon landing conspiracy theory? Who came up with the JFK conspiracy theory? Who came up with the 9/11 conspiracy theory?
Well, there was a long time that we didn't know that it was Woodward and Bernstein. I mean,
No, it was instant.
I'm sorry that we didn't know who Deep Throat was.
Well, that's fine, but I still mean the person who broke the story ultimately. As far as it's true,
whoever it was that directed Loose Change, we have Alex Jones. We have names for reporters behind this shit. I don't think that gives it any validity whatsoever.
Okay, I guess that's fair. I guess my point is that if something was true, it usually is much bigger news than fringe conspiracy
It's groundbreaking.
Theories. Yeah, I guess that's sort of my point.
And I mean that.
But you're right. It was false. I told you I rambled. Okay.
I don't think I think it's a valid argument.
myself.
I like your argument. I think it's true.
Well, thank you, Joey.
Well, there's certainly levels to that, and if you are conspiracy minded, then you can, certainly justify anything continually.
Great point.
And
yeah. So what do you mean by that?
Well, you can take that to its logical conclusion. Yeah. So since we did have the Watergate conspiracy and we did have that breaking, now we have established a system where less of that is possible. So you've established a system where there is media control more so than there ever was, and that's not even a conspiracy. That is just obviously blatant that the media is way more controlled now than it has ever been, especially when you talk about the idea of access. You can be allowed to be a White House reporter, but you have to adhere to certain conditions. For the most part, they're not just going to allow rabble-rousers to be inside the White House press room. And so through those minor acts, you can have a larger control over things. So the sort of the basis for most conspiracy theories, especially when people talk about the idea that people can't keep secrets, the idea is that if the Illuminati is actually doing their job, they are establishing a system in which you have no choice but to do what they want, whether or not you agree with it or even know what their reasonings are. So
what is the Illuminati? I don't understand. I've never understood this.
Now we're digging deep.
Right. So I mean, essentially, the Illuminati is the enlightened ones, the overseers, the 1% out of 1%. They are the ones that have the money, the power, and the influence to actually make things happen.
Is it fair to say that this is a New World Order type?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing. Your Freemasons, your Knights Templar,
your Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. Well, the Hollywood Whackers. That's a whole other sort of event we can go on.
Okay. I didn't want to cut you off, so continue. I'm sorry.
I have no idea.
That was a wrestling. That was a really good wrestling wrestling joke for all the listeners out there. No one got that. It's okay. Continue.
I was there. NWO.
There are wrestling fans just howling right now.
I love this. They've been waiting for a good reference for a long time.
Go ahead. So the Illuminati is what?
The Illuminati is the ones that actually have the power.
Okay.
So if you're, I think we've talked about this infographic before, but it's been circulating around where they were showing the public popularity of certain things versus how much of them got passed, and versus the popularity among the rich people and the wealthy classes, the people that were actually able to make those decisions. And almost across the board, all political decisions are based on what those few people in power want, rather than what the actual electoral want, or the people
electorate,
or the electorate want. Thank you. So the idea is that you don't necessarily have to micromanage everything to be able to control the fate of the world. The idea here is that when people are talking about the Illuminati, they're talking about people that have a 50-year, 100-year vision for this country. They are, or for the world, essentially. They are people that have the ability, have the wherewithal, and have the influence to be able to actually enact changes that are going to affect the rest of the world. And it doesn't necessarily take 100,000 people all lying to commit a conspiracy. All it takes is a couple of people with power to say that this is the direction we want to go. Look at Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch has a media empire, and that media empire is definitely directed in a specific direction. It is a very conservative mindset across almost all of their programming, regardless of if it's news programming or entertainment programming. It still has a much more conservative bent, and that is one of the biggest ways that you can control a population, especially these days. I mean, media is one of the most powerful propaganda tools that has ever been invented.
Well, how does this equate to a conspiracy across the board, though? I mean, if Rupert Murdoch is an example of someone who can, who can influence, certainly. But why does that mean that he's tied to,
basically
Mike Illuminati?
Well, yeah. Once him and Mike Illuminati have a beer and decide that this is what they want to do, then both of them go off and try and accomplish those things. That is essentially a conspiracy, because the people in that country have not voted for those things. These are people that are just powerful,
you're right, but
that have taken it upon themselves
you're right,
to change
but
the country.
Who is Mike Illuminati? That's the problem. And
another rich guy.
Yeah,
but that's the problem. Well, it does matter, because because it could just be desperate people who are like, who essentially are in power because they have a lot of money, and that's a problem. Sure, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a conspiracy.
That's my question. Does it imply a cover-up? Does someone have to be hiding something to be a conspiracy?
I think I'm saying no in this
because
case,
I don't think Murdoch is hiding anything. He's clearly made his opinion known.
Not to yes.
The
and
Koch
no.
brothers are clearly known to be a Republican supporter.
I'll put it this way,
right, but to what extent?
Okay, I'll put it this way. The conspiracy in this case essentially means that rich people want more money. I don't see that as a conspiracy theory. That's sort of just human nature.
Oh, no, that's just a specific example of one person that might be involved in these things, one arm of the branch of the Illuminati that can actually enact things.
Okay, well then in that case, what's the goal of the Illuminati then?
Well, that's depends on who you talk to and depends on which conspiracy theory you're going with.
I guess that's kind of
what do powerful people want?
That's what I'm saying.
To keep power and get more money.
Well, yeah, going back to the New World Order situation, that is, usually touted as being the end game for the Illuminati.
Okay.
Is a one world government where they have say over everything, and they are allowed to make the laws which allow them to gain more power and more money.
Okay, well, going back to what I said earlier, I tend to believe anything in the narrative. So now I'm freaked out. So please make me not believe. Now I believe in the Illuminati. So please make me no longer believe in the Illuminati.
Oh, you're talking to the wrong guy here.
Fuck you. You just convinced me that the Illuminati exists, and you still believe in them? Joey, then help me.
I mean, okay, don't ignore the Illuminati. It's just a fancy word for the oligarchy, the aristocracy, whatever you want to call them, the people who control shit. Anyways,
why does that make you feel better?
Because it sounds like
because it's not a conspiracy.
I think he's thinking Da Vinci Code when it's just some rich guy in Wall Street.
Well, yes, but once 5 of those rich guys get together and decide to do something, and then they
want
start
money,
enacting
though.
that. But yes, when they're enacting that outside of the system that is designed for enacting that.
But I think
So they are circumventing the government in order to achieve their goals. That is a conspiracy.
Well, sure. I mean, like we've got the inside job in general, like the whole bank.
9/11 was an inside job. The other inside job.
The bank stuff. So okay.
Wait, hold on. Is that a conspiracy theory to you, Sean O'Brien? The bank stuff?
That is a conspiracy for sure.
Certainly
It is not a conspiracy
I guess it's not a
theory.
theory. You're right. It's just.
I mean,
that is, but it is absolutely a conspiracy.
Simply broken by certain reporters.
But that's one of the things that I wanted to define here.
Because that's just rich people, according to you, human nature.
Right, that's what I'm saying. A conspiracy is not necessarily in the fringe idea of conspiracy theory, because again, what I said was, what does the Illuminati want? I understand what Wall Street bankers want and what an oligarchy people want, what Rupert Murdoch wants. I understand that they just want more money. Yeah. Well, but sure. But then why is it a conspiracy? Money is power. Yeah, but then why is it a conspiracy? Because I'm sorry. Why is it? Why is there okay, I don't see an agenda per se as far as a bunch of people needing to get together in this group, because basically if I want money and you want money and and there's someone in power who ultimately wants the same thing that we want, we don't have to talk to each other for us to all understand kind of instinctively the fact that, well, we can deregulate the banks, and then therefore we can make more
Republicans.
Money. Okay, well,
don't get too crazy about it.
So let's bring it to something that's a little bit less tied in with money. Are you gentlemen familiar with the idea of a false flag?
Yes.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea essentially there is that the government wants to get into a war so that they basically either attack their own people or have some sort of staged attack where it is blamed on the country that they want to go to war with.
The military-industrial complex.
Exactly. Yeah, and we have.
What are some examples of false flag?
Let's see. We have. People often discount it because it was the Nazis, but the burning of the Reichstag. So the idea that they burned down their own buildings, their own government buildings, and blamed it on, I think they blamed it on the Jews, but if I remember correctly.
Or so the communists.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And so that was used as more justification to their people to go to war.
How did we confirm that the Nazis themselves did that?
I think that's general history.
There's been some studies into that. It's possible. They think that Goering was possibly behind it.
Certainly, it's possible,
but they don't have a lot of history because it was the 40s and they burned everything.
Okay, so it's not necessarily confirmed that was falce flag.
There's also Operation Northwoods.
30s, not 30s.
Operation Northwoods was a plan to start bombing areas of the United States and blaming it on Cuba so that we could start the war with Cuba and the Russians.
Okay.
That was a plan that was essentially drafted and brought to McNamara, and then people got a little bit too much wind of it, and it was kiboshed before it actually went into effect.
Okay, so it was proposed, but they never actually did it.
Right, but I mean, the mere fact that those things are proposed is often pointed to as something that is a possibility. So of
course, it's a possibility, but go ahead.
Right, and so I mean,
anything is a possibility.
But yes, that's often pointed to as one of the most confirmable
suggestions.
Exactly.
That's fine, but there's nothing wrong with it being suggested. It wasn't enacted.
The mere fact that it was able to be put together and suggested, like logistically, they had military facts on where they would bomb, when they would bomb them.
That's not a big deal.
Yeah, that's fine.
They have that for every single country ever for every situation.
That's what they do. That's what chess players will do when they're sitting there playing chess. It's just if you're a strategic mind and you're being paid to do so, you come to your boss and you basically say, look, this might be a little bit out of the realm of kind of craziness, but hey, look, these are the facts. This is what it is.
Yeah, they have plans.
Do with it as you choose.
All right, Gulf of Tonkin.
What is that?
That is basically how we got into the Vietnam War. We had ships in the Gulf that were kind of edging closer and closer and basically provoking them. And we just kind of kept pushing them until they fired upon us. And we used that as justification to essentially start the war with Vietnam.
Yeah. Okay. Why is that false flag? I don't understand.
It's not necessarily false flag.
That's provoking.
It's exactly. It's a type of it's a sister to it. But actually, I want to say something about this, and I actually kind of agree with Sean about the Gulf of Tonkin, the Reichstag. My thing about this is I think it was a different time, and people might call me naive here again, but I really do think, and that's okay, but I really want to think that the 50s, the 60s, these were the times where we simply didn't have the transparency that we can even have come close today. The power was a lot more congealed and concentrated, so there was a lot more ability. The JFK, for instance, all this stuff was able to be covered up. I simply will agree with you on Sean O'Brien in that there is too many people in power now, and we have too many ways to record someone with our cell phones. That is simply not possible for these conspiracy theories that took place in the 60s and the 50s to take place today. I just don't think that's
I didn't make that
feasible.
claim. The fact that there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in power now.
Yeah, well, they can't keep a secret, is what you said. There's too many people.
No, I just said in general.
That people can't keep secrets.
In general, it's people.
So theoretically, if there's more of them, then there's
absolutely.
There's no way that they could keep that secret.
The more people that are involved in the conspiracy, the less likely it becomes to.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I'm simply saying I'm sorry. I understand. Since the 70s and the 60s, there's tons more people that are involved in government and things.
I would argue then that the consolidation of power is that much more since then. The consolidation of wealth is that much more since then.
It depends on how you define power. So
we have very, very much fewer. That's whatever.
You're right. You got
it. We have a lot less media fractionization. Everything is basically conglomerated, other than the internet,
right,
which is. But that is a whole other. Most of the time, anything that is only on the internet and is not in public media. All these rich people
have assistants. All these rich people have accountants. All these. Everybody has. There's
but they don't have to be involved in the decision-making process.
You're right, but they might be involved in it, or at the very least, they're intimately there, and they all have a fucking blog,
right? And they all benefit from it, and most of them would be of the same mindset where they would be wanting to. I'm
not sure that equates to a conspiracy, though. I guess that's my point. Like, if you're making money because if you're so if your paycheck, what is it? It's not maybe it's a Carl Sagan, quote. Like if you're
here he goes with that name dropping again.
Best friends with Carl Sagan, we know.
Me and Neil deGrasse Tyson, we're hanging out talking to Carl Sagan. I'm just
making it seem as if I'm not the one coming up with it.
Richard Dawkins went out with me last night.
I think I actually might be quoting Richard Dawkins on this as well. But it's Richard Dawkins quoting, I think it was Carl Sagan.
I gotta get a sound effect for name dropping.
She just sure.
We just play Sean.
a little. I would say like what's the when a like a fucking water thing when the water. A drop in the water.
The Ferris Bueller thing.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, fuck you guys. The fuck was I talking about? It's very hard to believe something if your paycheck needs you to not believe it, basically, or is hinged upon you. Is whatever. I can't think of the word right now.
Certainly, and that's the control of the Illuminati. That is how they.
Yeah, but that's a huge step, though. See what I'm saying? Like, sure, you're right. It's you can definitely pay people off in a sense, but all of a sudden it now means that there's a global conspiracy for people in power to kind of garner all the money together so just they can, can what? That's what I'm saying.
This goes back to my original question of what's the difference between a conspiracy, between propaganda, between marketing, between spin. These are all just kind of factions of the same sort of idea, in that we are a democracy that is controlled by people that are not voting. We are a society that is built on one system, whereas we have this subsystem or this higher system.
The difference
that
is
can
in the
actually
semantics.
come in.
In one case, the system is broken. In another case, there are people in power who've conspired to break it.
Right.
Those are two huge different things.
No, certainly, but those are two viewpoints of the same reality that we have. So
in one case, one requires evidence. The other, it's based on the evidence. Right. So the conspiracy. So I need more evidence then to understand to believe the Illuminati. I guess that's my point.
Oh, I'm certainly not trying to convince you that the Illuminati exists, but
I thought you were.
Well, but nevertheless, I mean, if you do believe that, it is up to you to essentially
to fight against it. But
No, not to fight against it. To prove that it is a conspiracy. If it actually is a conspiracy, that's a huge problem, right? And that's there. But And of course, the Illuminati is such an unfalsifiable kind of point that, again, that goes to your point of what is the difference between the two. It's like, sure, we can just call a bunch of fucking rich people the Illuminati if you want, even though they aren't calling themselves that. And are we wrong? Well, yeah, because fucking semantically speaking, they're not. They're just a bunch of rich assholes.
Well, yeah. Are we going to call De Beers a conspiracy?
Exactly right. But you were going off on this false flag thing, and we got cut off. So So I assume you were leading up to some 9/11 action.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of where most of that culminates. Essentially, is the idea that. So how much do you guys know about the supposed 9/11 conspiracy theories?
A lot.
Okay.
A moderate amount.
All right. Yeah. So the idea there is essentially the one big thing that you always have to point out to people that don't know anything is that it's not necessarily that the government committed 9/11 as much as the theory goes that they let it happen so that they could allow other things to happen.
Which has changed, by the way. That wasn't the original conspiracy theory, I should say. It wasn't the original conspiracy theory.
Well, at the time, there were tons of theories coming from everywhere, and the idea the
most popular one, though, of course, continues to be the fact that there were no people on the plane, right? That there were that's right or no?
I've heard that from both sides. Yeah.
What do you mean both sides?
I've heard that the planes
from both
were full
elements of the conspiracy.
or not full. Yeah.
But within the conspiracy.
Within the conspiracy world, that is debated, is what I'm saying.
That's what okay, I understand. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. But initially, that was a large part of it. There was no one on the plane, that it was a controlled demolition.
Yeah.
What else?
Whether or not there were bombs on the plane, whether or not the planes were remote controlled. One of the sort of bigger things that always stuck out in my mind was
Building 7.
Building 7. That's weird. There was no plane that had Building 7. There was no reason. They have quotes or they have clips of the guy saying "pull it," referring to a controlled demolition usually. But the bigger, or one of the weird things, I guess, around that is I'm sure you guys all know the show X-Files, but there was a spin-off show from the X-Files called The Lone Gunman. If you guys are familiar with the show, The Lone Gunman was like a small group of like 3 guys that Mulder would go to and consult on, different conspiracy things. Mm-hmm. But they had their spin-off show. And their pilot episode of the spin-off show was, I believe, 6 months before 9/11, and it was almost beat for beat what happened on 9/11. Planes crashing into buildings. The conceit of the show was essentially that the planes were remote controlled or drone operated, essentially. But that was something that was from the things I have heard, Chris Carter, the creator of X-Files and that show, said that was a script that actually showed up as a spec script for an X-Files episode. And so they actually spun that off into its own show, but it wasn't something that he wrote. It was something that was given to him.
Well, yeah, but I mean, so the who was it? Columbine, Eric Harris. Eric Harris in his journal, fantasized about flying a plane at the World Trade Center in his journal. So it's not a totally fanciful thing. I mean,
no, it's
more importantly, I should say, Bin Laden considered it and fucking actually did it. Like, we're discounting that, right? Like, it's an idea that, of course, people have had.
But
what
again,
does that mean?
The conspiracy theory is that those in power allowed it to happen, so they knew that it was all happening. They interceded with all of the communications. They were aware of everything that was happening, and they allowed it to happen at the very least, or they perpetrated at the very most, depending on which part of the conspiracy spectrum you're on. So
to what end?
Essentially the Patriot Act.
Wait, really? That's okay.
I was going to say war in Iraq.
Yeah, that's what I had always heard.
That's certainly part of it. War for oil, being able to take over the Middle East. But
but this goes back to, so in other words, if it was in a New World Order conspiracy theory world, then it would be for the Patriot Act. But in a totalitarian governmental conspiracy theory, it would be for the war in Iraq and oil and all that. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
So those are two different.
I just don't see the Patriot Act making. Oh, that's not true.
If it's New World Order, then yeah.
No, I follow the money there, and I would say that the Patriot Act actually did make a lot of money for these small security companies.
Well, the Patriot Act was less about money
right.
and more about more governmental control.
No, I know exactly.
So
I'm trying to find the money there, and I don't really think it's as much as the war in
so
Iraq.
for you, it comes all back to money then. You're saying.
Yeah, well, at least to me, I mean, I don't believe in that.
Control is power, power is money. It all translates.
Exactly, and I think exactly right. That's why I would follow the money for that reason.
I understand. It's an important point.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as most of the Patriot Act were bills that it was a compilation of bills that were proposed and voted down for years and years that were increasing security, increasing the NSA, increasing the CIA, increasing the FBI.
Yeah, a lot of jobs for people that.
Certainly, there's a ton of money in there. Increasing defense, just in general, defense contracting. Beware the military-industrial complex. I mean, that is a conspiracy theory spouted from on high, essentially. And
Eisenhower.
I don't think I don't think he was wrong. That is, we have been in perpetual war since 9/11. I mean, if there is money, or if money is the issue, then there's certainly enough to go around to incentivize enough people that have power to do that. When we talk about 9/11, we're talking about 3,000 lives. In the grand scheme of things, 3,000 lives is fucking nothing. 3,000 lives is, especially if you're in a militaristic standpoint, if you are the commander of a military, losing 3,000 lives to win a war is absolutely nothing.
A war against what? And how have we profited off of the war in Iraq or Afghanistan?
Well, that's the idea of perpetual war.
The Illuminati theoretically has. The top, Halliburton has, theoretically.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, America has not.
Right, obviously.
Clearly.
But a small group of people, i.e. the military.
Northrop Grumman, Halliburton, Lear, Boeing.
Those
These are all the people that have the money, that have the ability to make those decisions and have the ability to influence the people. Mm-hmm. They are the ones that can afford lobbyists that can actually go and talk to people about these things. So, I mean, I honestly, I don't know what the fuck I believe, but,
that's good.
Yeah, I do like the idea of conspiracies, and I do like the idea of entertaining these notions, if nothing else, as folklore, as our societal story is evolving. And the other big thing I wanted to address really quick is the idea of somehow getting past this that Joey brought up, that this was something that was in the past, that was in the 50s and 60s, that, it was with JFK and it stopped after Hoffa and RFK and whatnot, and that was the end of it. I mean, to me, that was just the beginning of it. To me, that's where that stuff actually becomes known.
Yeah.
That's just where we become aware of how that stuff
we just
actually
get better
affects.
At hiding.
Exactly. Yeah, and the better media gets, the better they have to be at hiding their intentions and hiding their actions.
Is there a conspiracy theory that predates JFK? I guess aliens.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something about the false flag stuff, if we can.
Sure.
Because the Mexican War is a big one that people don't know anything about. And I was talking to Sean about this in our private time. But
our private
you guys have private time?
Oh, that was great.
That sounds wonderful.
Wow.
We had some private time.
Talk about a conspiracy.
Yeah. Okay. James K. Polk is known in many polls
austere, severe,
top 20 presidents. People rank him like 12, 13 best president of all time. Mm-hmm. This guy was the George W. Bush of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. He had a false flag. Basically what happened was he had I think it was, and I really should Google this, but I'm pretty close. He had 30 or 60 soldiers or something like that, just in the territories of Texas and Arizona. And they by accident crossed over into Mexico, and the Mexican soldiers legally were able to defend themselves, and they killed maybe one or two of them, because that's what happened. Mm-hmm. And he went back to Congress and said that the Mexican army crossed over into our borders and attacked American soldiers and killed American lives. And this led to the entire Mexican War, which led to us taking over and conquering pretty much a third of this country. And no one realizes this stuff. And everyone thinks James K. Polk is the greatest president ever. But if they really knew, they would probably put him, top worst president, or next to George W. Bush. So I was looking at
Well, he was great because he was a conqueror. He was great in the old school sense of being a leader.
He got us land.
Exactly, yeah.
Like Thomas Jefferson got Louisiana Purchase, but we love him for that. But that was
was this Santa Annie's leg?
What?
Santa Annie's leg?
Santa Annie's leg.
Santa Anta's leg or whatever.
Yeah, well, that
Okay.
Wait, Santa Anna was from the Texas independence.
Is that-
that's
that's different.
1836, a little bit
Sorry.
before the Mexican War. That was for the fight for Texas.
Nerd.
My
Anyway.
history knowledge comes from King of the Hill. So
All right. Anyways, but actually, I really wanted to address this point about being in the past, and I think that actually Sean correctly argued with me. I think that he's got a good point there. Maybe it's not necessarily in the past, but I will say it's lessened. But what is interesting, I do know that today, is that the conspiracy theories I think that were interesting are the ones that we can kind of see from like the underbelly, meaning that we can see Putin and the false flag thing that he did in Ukraine last year.
Mhm.
I mean, that was a false flag operation committed by one of the biggest countries in the world,
Certainly.
and everyone pretty much knows about it in the Western world. Well, like, he just did that. He pretty much just took over Ukraine. Like, he's still just doing it. But the fact is, and to the Russians, they have no idea. Obviously, they do not. They would, if I said that to them, they would think I'm the conspiracy theorist.
Oh, I
and
see what you're saying.
So it's like,
Yeah.
from my point of view, yeah, we're totally seeing the truth, but they will view the entire country of America as conspiracy theorists. They think we're all just
Right. I guess we and you know what? North Korea. That brings
Yeah.
up North Korea
Yeah.
perfectly there too.
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
good
like
point.
you know, how can you convince? I mean, it all comes down to your belief system in general. And again, back to the rational beliefs, right? I mean, it's so the basically the rationale behind someone not believing that Putin is incapable of doing such a thing goes to the very fact that our government is benevolent, right? He's a good man, he's a good leader. He wouldn't go so far as to perpetrate this type of thing, right? Which is kind of an irrational belief, right? It's just a sort of an emotional point of like, oh, he couldn't do this. It's like, well, how do you know that he couldn't do this? It's like, well, because blah blah blah. Again, North Korea is the same sort of thing, right? They have their whole irrational beliefs there as far as the fact that we are the cause of everything, all of their woes in the world, and how can you convince them otherwise? You never could. We are the cause of it.
yeah.
And so, but it is, and it's not completely irrational, but it is based in irrationality in many ways, basically, because it's Joey, you can explain more about this, but
What, North Korea?
sure.
No, I mean, you got. I think we don't need to go more into North Korea. I think we know the deal. I don't really have anything different to say about that. In that, it's just I like the idea that what a conspiracy theory might be for
As
someone
an outside,
else. It's
yeah,
just a
you're
completely
right.
Different perspective.
The relative,
It's all relative.
yeah, the relative element of the conspiracy theory. Well, but that's interesting because it is
Or maybe
definitely
we just know the truth.
Well, I guess that's the point. Yeah, it's a question of why do we believe it? I mean,
We have a free press.
Well, first,
Well, right, yeah.
it comes down to, how much you trust your government. And so what about the issue in Flint, Michigan? Do we call that a conspiracy?
Yeah.
With the lead in water? And so is that a
If people knew
conspiracy
about it,
theory?
I think that's
yeah.
more
Is
gross
that-
negligence, but I mean, it could be considered. But
I mean,
that
it-
can be a conspiracy theory, I guess.
It seems rather intentional. It seems like most people, or at least
Really, was it intentional? I
the-
don't know.
I mean, it
didn't-
wasn't intentional to poison people, but people knew it was going to happen.
right.
Well,
That's the difference.
right.
People knew it was
Well, I
going to
think
happen.
that was
and-
also a greed thing. That was simply because chloramine is, or am I saying that right? Chloramine is cheaper than chlorine. So it's just a cheaper thing to put in the additive to put in the.
Yeah, well, no, the issue was that lead pipes are a thing throughout the country. So especially with the problem really is our old infrastructure.
Right.
So since back when they first started bringing water to everyone, lead pipes were one of the first things that they did. Lead pipes are not necessarily a problem unless your water is corrosive.
Mhm.
The water source that they were originally getting from, I think is it Lake Huron? Or Lake Superior. Either way, one of the Great Lakes is the source for the Detroit water, which is the water that they were pulling to Flint, Michigan. But then they decided to divert because they had to pay Detroit for that water, so they diverted to their local river system. Their river system had a much more acidic water to it that they didn't control, and so that was leaching the lead out of the pipes, which actually allowed the consumer or the constituents to imbibe
Right.
it. So the lead was always there. It's just switching the water supply allowed that lead to be activated in these systems.
But what
Right,
was the
so-
reason for switching?
Money.
Right. So
There was
this-
no racial.
No,
thing there.
the mandate for the state took over the city of Flint, Michigan, because they were basically bankrupt and they
Right.
were fucked as a city. So the state takes over and their mandate is to cut costs, save money at all corners, whatever they can do.
Right.
So what they, one of the ways that they were able to save millions of dollars was to stop paying for water that was treated from Detroit and start taking their own local source of water. water.
I see.
So
Okay.
to answer your question, as far as is it a conspiracy or is it a conspiracy theory, this kind of can be answered by my point again to cynicism versus skepticism, right? It certainly could be. It is currently a conspiracy theory, obviously, because I don't know if it's necessarily, if there's necessarily evidence right now in front of me to believe it one way or the other, right? I'm a skeptic in that sense. However, sure, it certainly sounds plausible. And so I'm not going to be cynical and simply just believe that it was a conspiracy. But I'm certainly skeptical of the fact that I'll entertain the notion that people certainly believed it and yet, did cut costs and knew that it might, cause some damage. But what else are you going to do? I mean, I think people at their core are good. I think people ultimately, again, cynicism versus
That's where we
skeptic,
differ.
right?
Yeah,
exactly. I think people on the whole don't necessarily want to do harm to each other. It's just that they're constantly weighing this, the pros and cons of every different issue.
It's the invisible hand. You're going to do what's best for you.
No, I don't think that's true at all.
Okay.
If you're a government employee, right? I mean, it's going to suck either way, and you might be getting paid, but you have to decide between these two different things.
Well, yeah, but what's best for you is not getting yelled at by your boss, and so by not wanting to get yelled at by your boss, you are trying to cut as many corners as possible. So the path of least
and then that boss
resistance-
is going to get the other boss, but ultimately
shit rolls downhill.
Yeah, perhaps, but I mean, even if we do presuppose the idea that government itself is there, right? Like is there to do good for its citizens. I think that a lot of people
again, that's where we differ.
Exactly. I think that's the key. I think that's the key. A lot of people really. I'm not telling anything. I'm not necessarily claiming that. I'm simply saying that the idea that a lot of people hold that the government is this entity, this thing that kind of can do harm, I don't necessarily subscribe to. It's a bunch of fucking people.
I agree.
You know what I mean? It's just a bunch of fucking people. I don't think there is one kind of government element of it. And the mindsets behind those individuals, it can be systemic. And so that's why we end up thinking about this point of, the government. And there's examples throughout history, right? I mean, prison systems. We can talk about the inequality in laws from between urban areas and the suburb areas. What's the perfect fucking example? Crack cocaine versus regular cocaine. The disproportionate amount of people in prisons, right? Black people in prisons versus white people in prisons.
Speaking of conspiracies that just got uncovered. Right. Nixon's aide just recently said
yes,
that.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly.
What's
Perfect
this?
point.
Do you want? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Explain.
Nixon's aide basically said the war on drugs was put together to keep down hippies and black people and other undesirables from the 60s.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. It's confirmed.
That's what drug law has always been, though.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, this
and
is
so is that
concrete.
so is
This
that
is proof that the guy-
right? And so that is a conspiracy theory that isn't shed upon because it's really not that sexy, right? But there's an entire generation of African Americans in fucking prison, because of this conspiracy, and here we are talking about false flags.
Totally.
You see what I'm saying? That's ultimately the problem here. So whether or not something is a conspiracy or not is kind of besides the point. It's a question of the facts and the harm done by believing something irrationally. You know what I mean? And simply kind of going along with the story rather than looking at the facts themselves. So sure, Flint, Michigan. So to go back on point, Flint, Michigan, right? Was it a conspiracy? It absolutely might have been. But why is the better question? Do you see what I'm saying? What is the problem there? Why did people conspire to? And I don't think people can. And that's the other problem too. I don't think necessarily speaking, a bunch of people do. Ending up making decision after decision after decision, which causes this sort of horrific thing, means that it was a conspiracy across the board for this horrific thing to go down for reason X, Y, and Z. Well, that's the difference.
It just kind of gets to Corolla's point of stupid or liar. This is something that was catastrophic that happened, and either people knew about it and they were lying about it and choosing to be horrible, or they're just ineptness of government that is compounding on itself that keeps going further and further. So it's, either way, there is something that needs to be done there. But
but in one instance we can do something, in the other it's harder. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see that. I see it.
Yeah, but until
in one instance we kind of throw our hands up and say, "Oh, that's the way shit works." That's the narrative. In the other instance, we say, "This is a problem. We need to address these problems step by step."
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? rather than just sort of assuming, because that's I guess the danger of conspiracies, because it's the narrative itself becomes,
It
like
allows
you
you to
said,
check out
folklore,
and-
right? It
yeah.
becomes sexy, it becomes interesting, and you sort of, exactly like you said, you check out, and that's fucking dangerous. That's
True.
very dangerous. And I guess that's the problem. That's another big problem I have with conspiracy theories in general. Does that answer your question? Whatever it was.
There was a question.
Well, continue. Yeah. keep
Yeah,
going.
no. One other, I guess, less governmental, more money thing I wanted to bring up was just the idea of like big pharma. So, whether we call it a conspiracy or just marketing or just general business, if we go back to like the whole AIDS thing, when AIDS was first coming around in the 80s and first being publicized and known, there's the idea that the big pharma companies were actually working on a cure. And that became something that was publicly frowned upon for weird homophobic reasons, because they thought it was, the gay cancer at that point, and they were not necessarily willing to fund those things. But then there is also the idea that they just blatantly realized that it would make more money to solve them symptomatically rather than to actually cure the disease. So if you can create that drug cocktail that they are on for their entire life, then that's going to make you way more money than a pill that actually cures everything. So at that point, is that a conspiracy, or is that just a business decision? Or
well, first thing, that needs to be confirmed. I can't necessarily just simply buy that. You're at this point, you need
there's a lot of
basically-
presuppositions in there. Certainly.
Yeah, exactly. Like the very first presupposition is that doctors essentially aren't looking for a cure for, scientists aren't looking for.
It is certainly verifiable
never
that
gonna
the drug companies themselves shifted their focus from a cure to a
Treatment
relief, to a
type of thing?
treatment.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
And that is something that happened around the late 80s, early 90s. That is
Sure.
certainly verifiable.
Yeah, of course.
The reasoning behind that is
Right.
where the conspiracy comes in.
Exactly. And
So-
we can understand the reasoning behind that on a logistical level easily, right? But why would money need to be behind that? Money can be behind that in the sense of, it's easier and faster to create treatments so we can alleviate this and kind of deter it while we continue to look for a treatment. But we do need to but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make more money off of it.
Certainly, a treatment is
does.
inherently going to make more money than a cure.
Think about the light bulb. Like, if do you want to make a light bulb that never dies, or do I want to sell you 10 million light bulbs throughout your entire lifetime?
Planned obsolescence. It's
Yeah.
something that happens in technology, and technology dictates biotech, and biotech is all we're talking
That's a
about.
legitimate
Yeah.
concern. I understand that. The question is, is there some guy sitting in a room going, I'm going to not give them a cure?
Exactly.
I don't
yeah.
think that seems weird. I don't think, even if
Right.
there's a group of people to make that decision, I doubt there's enough. And you have to be there's a cynicism,
Right,
pretty
yeah.
cynical to believe that a group of people would come up with that idea. That seems pretty horrific.
But on the other hand, it is something that they had to have a conversation about when
Sure.
they decided to shift their focus from a cure to treatment. When they decided to shift,
Absolutely.
that is,
And they're looking at the bottom line, and I get it. I understand. And so, yeah, you're right. That would be business. That would be business. But I don't necessarily think it's conspiracy. Do you see what I'm saying? It is not necessarily a moral decision. But it's an understandable decision in a way, right? I mean, if they think that the likelihood of them coming up with a cure in the next 5 years is plausible, right? Versus they could come up with, 10 different treatments for that same thing within 5 years. Well, then what is the moral justification of only keeping all this money so we can come up with a cure and just allowing people to die painfully and, person after person after person, when we actually could create 10 different things that created? I think that there's a moral question there, and it's not just about money. I guess that's my point.
well, and that just gets into knowing the motivations. What is it?
Yeah, that's what I
knowing
mean.
the heart of a mortal man. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
and I think people at their core are a little bit, and this goes back into the whole point of like, whether I'm an optimist or the most optimistic person also happens to be skeptical, and I actually don't think I'm an optimist either. I really don't. I don't even know how to put it really. When it comes to optimism, people see me as optimistic because why are we going to talk about the bad shit? If I'm hanging out with a bunch of people, I'm going to try to see the good in things simply because I don't want to be an asshole. I want to simply shed light on the shitty things that we're talking about.
Negative Nancy.
Right, exactly. It doesn't. It's it does me no benefit to make somebody else unhappy, because making somebody else happy makes me happy. So I'm perfectly content talking about good things. That doesn't mean in my private time. Doesn't call back.
That's a different kind.
Oh, I thought it was the same thing. I thought you guys had the same kind of private time. I don't think about the all the woes in the world 100%. Like Weltschmerz. We talked about this a couple episodes ago.
What was that one again?
Weltschmerz.
Yeah, no. What was the meaning though? I forgot
all
already.
When you try to complicate
all the words,
all the woes of the world at once, and you try to contemplate all that.
Of course, a German come up with that.
Right, exactly. Sure, but as far as people's rationalization behind things, I don't think it's as cut and dry and as heartless as just, I can make money this way, and so I'm going to completely discount somebody else's emotions. I guess it's possible.
Seems pretty hippie-ish, man.
You're right. Maybe it is ignorant and it is overly optimistic of me. It's possible. And it could even go back to our Trump issue, right? Where people are just sort of overlooking the racism because they prefer to believe reasons X, Y, and Z are actually behind all this rather than the core of something. So I don't know.
Maybe you just don't want to believe that the government is inherently evil or something like that, which I don't believe.
No, I don't have a problem believing that. But again, I think that's a weird way to put it.
I have a problem in any of those. I kind of feel your way. I do feel more optimistic, and I agree with you. I just simply don't believe the humans will do those kind of decisions.
Right.
I do agree, though, that there definitely is greed as a motivating factor, and I will look for the money in all cases.
Totally.
I think it's just interesting that you two kind of have this actually somewhat of agreement, but you kind of just call it different things because,
as always,
Tron art, man.
Yeah, this is our constant.
Although
thing,
no, those are two different things actually.
To me, they are. To you, they aren't.
No,
there are too many callbacks right now, guys.
You're right.
We're playing too much inside
You're
baseball.
right. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joey.
I don't know where
you were saying that we agree, but we're calling it two different things.
Yeah, it's just the economy thing, the businessy thing, or whatever you want to call it, the money thing. Sean equates money with power, which it is. Sorry, Sean. It's both Sean. Sean Fau equates money with power, which it is.
I don't not equate that.
But
though.
I think you're kind of separating that and saying it's not a conspiracy because it's just simply business. It's not, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, exactly. I'm saying there's no order to it. It's human nature, and that's the explanation of the human nature. I mean, again, this goes back to our valid versus what is like Sean and I, we agree on something, but I don't know if the narrative as a premise is necessarily sound. That's the key.
Yeah,
that you actually believe that, by the way. You haven't actually stated that you do, come to think of it.
The reason I like conspiracy theories is that I am a cynic. I am on the opposite end. I certainly do not believe all people are inherently good. I would gravitate towards the other end of the spectrum, if anything. Maybe not necessarily that people are evil, but people are. Yeah. I don't believe that there is any such thing as true altruism. I do.
No, I don't either.
I think
do.
That, yeah.
You think there's altruism?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We'll get into that.
That's a whole show.
Okay.
That is a whole philosophical
we got
question.
one right there. You want to know a true altruist?
What, Yuri? Yuri's
Yes.
an altruist?
Yuri Gagarin the cat. He's only in it he's only in it for himself. He doesn't care. But I mean, there are, that was kind of what I wanted to address, is that just the idea of conspiracy theory. To me, that is just a label that gets put on things that are it's detrimental to the conversation, I think.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean the idea that all you have to do is label something as a conspiracy theory, and we no longer have to consider it. All of the facts are in. That's something I hear a lot.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that argument before.
Well, I mean, you would agree that the term conspiracy theory
has a negative connotation
and
absolutely.
is dismissive.
100%. Yeah,
certainly,
for sure.
So, I mean, to me, that's just kind of what
interesting.
It's just as pig-headed from the other perspective.
Totally,
essentially.
totally. 100%. What are some examples of this? So you said the Flint thing. Is that something that people have said is just a conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of whether it's stupid or liar, essentially. So if it's either political just ineptness or it is a conspiracy, and people were trying to make money, or people were trying to just make themselves look good, or better save their job.
Oh, sure. But what I'm saying is that people have labeled that. You're saying that people have labeled that as a conspiracy theory in order to dismiss the possibility of it?
Yeah, the people that are pro-government would just say that that's a conspiracy theory. That
Okay, I
it
see.
was,
Are there some other examples of that you can think of?
I mean,
offhand?
that's pretty much all conspiracies is, they are dismissed by calling them such. Let's see here, voter fraud. So, we have the Diebold machines of what was it, 4 years ago, I think. The idea that, they would be just randomly changing your vote. You voted for Obama, but they would vote you, I think it was actually the other way around. I think they were counting votes for
Right,
Obama.
exactly.
But either way, the idea that, there is some sort of overarching power that is able to access these things at a level that allows them to manipulate the outcomes of important things.
That's where I would start to call it a conspiracy theory because it's the narrative that you're putting in.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the issue. Now, the facts themselves can absolutely be there and confirmable if they are, right? And the rationale behind it can be multi-layered. And I guess that's my biggest problem is just having one narrative behind the whole thing.
But that's every legal case that's ever tried. No one is ever there at the time of a crime being committed, and all they can do is look at the facts and try and establish a narrative. And essentially, that's what conspiracy theories are doing. They're looking at what evidence we do have available, which is often very little, and trying to craft a narrative that makes sense in their worldview. And I realize that caveat in their worldview, that is part of the crux of the argument, but that's no different than people trying to use those same facts to justify the government.
Yes, it is. It's hugely different because in one case we're trying to determine whether or not someone is guilty or innocent, right? And we hold the belief that the person is innocent until proven guilty, right? A conspiracy theory holds that the narrative is there until it is falsified. That's the problem. That's the issue. You know what I mean? That's why I have a problem with it. Does that make sense?
Yes, but then we get into that whole idea of proving a negative.
Exactly. That's what I mean. An unfalsifiable claim is not a rational argument. That's the problem.
Yes, but most of the time the evidence is. So the problem with most conspiracy theories is that they lie in that territory where it is indefinable.
Right,
and
exactly.
so the evidence is almost as clear on both sides.
Right.
And most of the time, both sides are using the same piece of evidence to justify the opposite
Here's
things.
a good example, right? So like a horoscope. If you read your horoscope, it's just vague enough.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, it's not even so much self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just vague enough where it seems like it applies to you. So it's there and it just kind of works and it is unfalsifiable because it's vague enough, right? So if you read your horoscope and it says, today you will face many challenges, and you may overcome some, and you may have troubles with others, but you will learn from them in the future, right? And so, sure, they must know I'm a Capricorn. That's my Capricorn day, right? But if you look at another, if you open up, that is an unfalsifiable claim, and that's what a lot of conspiracy theories will end up doing is they'll have this unfalsifiable kind of premise where it's all this, it all leads up into this kind of vague, nebulous narrative. Again, so 9/11 conspiracy theory is a good example where it started off, the conspiracy, the military-industrial complex wanted this. And so they perpetrated this crime. And it's like, well, no, we actually know that there were people, we have cell phone issues. Okay, fine. The cell phone issue is not a big deal. What about the people on the plane, right? People on the plane, there might have been, there might not have been. Oh, okay, there were. Okay, fine. Well, then there were people on the plane. So it wasn't remote controlled, but then it's still, it still was the government kind of like causing this to happen. It's like, well, no, they didn't cause it. They actually just let it happen. And it keeps, receding and changing and morphing because it's not. It's based on this narrative that you're trying to fulfill before the fact. And that's a logical fallacy. That's not how you go about determining the truth of things. And that's the biggest problem I have with it. If I read a horoscope that says, I will open up you will open up your door today and a man in a brown hat will try to sell you a timeshare, and that doesn't happen that day, that's a falsifiable claim. It is something that sticks your neck out, right? It's something that sticks its neck out for you, and you can falsify it. If the guy's wearing a black hat, that fucking prediction is wrong.
It's why no psychic will predict the Super Bowl.
Precisely. And so again, so if we talk about the conspiracy theory element of that, the realm in that we have the facts themselves. You don't build you don't come up with the narrative and try to connect the dots. You build the narrative from the beginning. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's
that's
why I know, man. Or I don't know, man.
When the politicians keep politicking before you turn to excessive drinking, spend some time collectively politinkering with the show where I don't know, man. 'Cause the truth is I don't know, man. I don't know, man. I don't know, man.
Truth is out there. Want to believe.
Oh, did it not get that? The truth is out there?
I think it got your
I think it
too.
crashed right.
It crashed?
Oh, wait. Going.